What if the most joyful sound could become the most terrifying? In 1962, a strange affliction swept through a small East African village, not with coughs or fevers, but with an unstoppable, agonizing tide of laughter that baffled science and crippled lives. It began innocently enough, a ripple of giggles in a distant classroom, but it soon escalated into a phenomenon so bizarre, so debilitating, that it etched itself into the annals of medical mystery. The year was 1962. Tanganyika, a nation brimming with the euphoria of newly acquired independence, was finding its feet on the world stage. Hopes were high, and the air was thick with the promise of a brighter future. In this optimistic atmosphere, far from the bustling capital, lay the village of Kashasha. It was a humble, close-knit community nestled amidst the verdant landscapes of the Bukoba district near the shores of Lake Victoria. Life in Kashasha revolved around its fields, its families, and its schools. One such institution was a girls' boarding school, a place of learning and discipline where young minds were being shaped for the future of the new nation. It was here, within the quiet confines of its classrooms, that the inexplicable began. On January 30th, 1962, a Monday, the usual morning routine was punctuated by an unusual sound. 3 girls, perhaps sharing a private joke, began to laugh. Their mirth was infectious, as laughter often is, and soon a few more students joined in. But this was no ordinary outburst of teenage amusement. The laughter, once started, refused to stop. It intensified, growing louder, more desperate, and utterly uncontrollable. The girls were racked by spasms of mirth that lasted not for minutes, but for hours. Their faces contorted, tears streamed down their cheeks, and their bodies shook with an energy that seemed to consume them entirely. It wasn't the sound of joy, it was the sound of something else, something deeply unsettling. The teachers, initially amused, quickly grew concerned. They tried to calm the girls, to reason with them, but their words were lost in the cacophony of relentless cackles and gasps. The laughter seemed to have a life of its own, an external force that had taken hold. It was bewildering, frustrating, and utterly terrifying to witness. Within days, the affliction had spread like wildfire through the school. Dozens of students were affected, their waking hours consumed by these uncontrollable fits. They couldn't concentrate, they couldn't eat properly, and their studies ground to a halt. The school, once a beacon of learning, became a crucible of involuntary, agonizing mirth. The symptoms weren't just the laughter itself. Many of the affected girls also experienced restlessness, crying spells, and even occasional fainting. Yet physically, they appeared healthy. Doctors were called, but their examinations revealed no fever, no rash, no discernible organic cause for their predicament. Their bodies were fine, but their minds, or perhaps their spirits, seemed to be in distress. As the situation deteriorated, the school was forced to close its doors in March, just 2 months after the first incident. The students were sent home, a decision made with the hope that separation would break the cycle. Instead, it only served to spread the mystery further. The laughter followed them. As the girls returned to their villages, they carried the affliction with them, and soon their families and neighbors began to succumb. The first major spread was to Inshamba, a nearby village where many of the students resided. Here, an additional 217 people, young and old, found themselves gripped by the same inexplicable paroxysms. From Inshamba, it radiated outwards. The laughter reached Kanyangareka, then other surrounding communities. It was no longer confined to girls' schools. Adults, parents, even some elderly villagers found themselves caught in its relentless grip. The total number of affected individuals eventually climbed into the thousands across the region. Life in these villages began to unravel. People were simply unable to perform their daily tasks. Farmers couldn't tend their crops, market vendors couldn't sell their goods, and children couldn't attend what few schools remained open. the basic fabric of society was strained to its breaking point. Imagine a community where the simple act of conversation could suddenly erupt into an hour-long fit of laughter, leaving the speaker breathless and exhausted. The fear was palpable. Was it a curse? A new kind of madness? The initial amusement had long since evaporated, replaced by deep concern and a growing sense of helplessness. People were desperate for answers, for a cure, for anything that could stop the relentless, energy-sapping mirth. Medical professionals were baffled. They conducted extensive tests looking for any infectious agent, any toxin, any physical abnormality that could explain the phenomenon. Blood samples were taken, neurological exams performed, but every single test came back negative. There was no virus, no bacteria, no poison. The victims were, by all conventional medical standards, perfectly healthy. This absence of physical evidence led doctors to consider a different kind of illness, one that resided not in the body's biology, but in its psychology. They began to suspect what is known as mass psychogenic illness, or MPI. Sometimes referred to as mass hysteria, MPI describes the rapid spread of illness symptoms among a group of people, often triggered by psychological stress, anxiety, or fear, without an identifiable organic cause. The symptoms of MPI are real, even if their origin is psychological. Individuals genuinely feel the distress, experience the physical manifestations, and are truly incapacitated. Their bodies are reacting to something, even if that something isn't a pathogen. In the case of Tanganyika, the symptom was laughter, but the underlying mechanism was thought to be shared psychological stress. But what could have caused such widespread psychological distress in this particular region at this specific time? To understand this, we must consider the socio-political climate of newly independent Tanganyika. The euphoria of freedom was undeniable, but it was also accompanied by significant societal shifts and pressures. Traditional ways of life were rapidly changing. Education, especially for girls, was being emphasized, opening up new opportunities, but also creating new expectations and anxieties. The transition from colonial rule to self-governance brought with it a sense of collective excitement, but also a profound uncertainty about the future. For the young women at the Shasha boarding school, these pressures could have been particularly acute. Boarding schools, by their nature, impose strict routines and discipline. There was the pressure of academic performance, the stress of exams, and the challenges of adapting to a new, more westernized educational system. These young girls were at a pivotal moment in their lives, caught between tradition and modernity, carrying the hopes of their families and their new nation. Imagine being a young girl in this environment. The strictures of the school, the demands of learning, the expectations placed upon you to succeed and contribute to the new Tanganyika. Add to that the hormonal changes of adolescence, the natural anxieties of growing up, and the potential for a collective tension to build up. One theory suggests that the initial laughter could have been a release of this pent-up stress. What if it started as a nervous laugh, a coping mechanism, that then escalated due to the collective psychological energy of the group? Once a few individuals started, the sight and sound of others laughing could have acted as a powerful suggestion, a trigger for those already predisposed to anxiety. The highly contagious nature of laughter itself, even when genuine, plays a role. We are wired to respond to the laughter of others. But in this instance, it became a perverse, self-reinforcing loop, where the very act of seeing someone laugh could induce the same agonizing fit in another. It was a shared experience of distress, manifesting as the very sound meant to express joy. The epidemic continued, ebbing and flowing, for nearly a year and a half. Villages would experience outbreaks, then a period of calm, only for the laughter to resurface weeks or months later. The longest recorded fit of laughter lasted for 16 days straight, an imaginable ordeal for anyone to endure. Schools across the region were repeatedly shut down. Kashasha School itself closed 3 times. The economic impact was devastating as productivity plummeted. social gatherings became fraught with anxiety as no one knew when the next wave of uncontrollable mirth might strike. The authorities eventually implemented measures focused on separating affected individuals and communities, hoping to break the chain of psychological contagion. Slowly, gradually, the intensity of the outbreaks began to wane. By late 1963, the laughter epidemic had largely subsided, leaving behind a bewildered population and a legacy of scientific intrigue. But even after the laughter stopped, the memory and perhaps some lingering psychological effects remained. The experience would undoubtedly have left its mark on those who endured it, shaping their perception of the world and the fragility of their own minds. The Tanganyika Laughter Epidemic stands as one of the most compelling and well-documented cases of mass psychogenic illness in history. It serves as a stark reminder of the intricate and often